The day she spoke like my grandma. It was it was during their final years that my grandparents had to leave their own home under the most heartbreaking circumstances. They didn't leave by choice. It was because of my uncle. He and his family had arrived at my grandparents' house one day, unannounced, with all their belongings. It didn't take long before they made my grandparents feel like outsiders in their own home. The mental strain was unbearable for them, and eventually they had no choice but to move in with us, into the home my father had built. My dad took care of them like they were his own children. He bathed them, changed their diapers, fed them when they couldn't lift their hands to eat. My mom cooked their meals with unwavering care, and my siblings and I cleaned their room daily. It wasn't always easy, but we loved them deeply, and their gratitude showed in the warmth of their smiles. This was what parents truly hope for in their final days, unconditional love and care. Life moved on, as it does, and one day my grandfather passed away at the age of 95. His absence left a void in our home, but we kept going. A few years later, my elder brother got married, and my sister-in-law joined us in taking care of my grandma. She, too, was well cared for until her time came. When she passed away, it was almost as if a chapter of our family closed. But my dad, he missed them immensely. It was as though he carried an unspoken desire to have them back, something he never said out loud, but something we all felt. Life has its own way of weaving stories. A few years after my grandma's passing, my brother and sister-in-law had twins, a boy and a girl. It's a tradition in our family, like in many Indian families, to name children after our ancestors. To honor my grandmother, we named the girl by taking the first 3 letters of her name. The twins grew up like any other children, unaware of the weight of the legacy behind their names. We rarely talked about my grandparents, so they knew almost nothing about them. But from a young age, my niece began to display some eerily familiar habits. She'd sit cross-legged on the floor exactly the way my grandma used to. My grandma had a peculiar habit of crushing ants with her bare fingers, and strangely enough, my niece picked up the same habit. At first, we brushed it off as coincidence. Kids do funny things, right? But then came the day that none of us could explain, a day that still sends chills down my spine when I think about it. The twins were 5 years old. That evening, my dad was unusually upset. He wouldn't say why, but he refused to eat dinner. We all tried to cheer him up, urging him to eat, but nothing worked. He just sat there, silent and distant. And then, out of nowhere, my niece walked up to him. She didn't call him Baba like she always did. Instead, she addressed him by his name. "Hey, Ashok," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Eat." It wasn't just the words, it was how she said it. The tone, the inflection, the exact cadence. It was my grandma's voice. We all froze. My dad's head snapped up, his eyes wide. For a moment, it was as if he saw his mother standing in front of him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he whispered, "She's back. She came back to care for me." He ate that night, his mood suddenly lifted, as if my grandma herself had scolded him into eating. But here's the part that haunts me the most. My niece had never heard my grandma's voice. She had never even known what kind of person my grandma was. That incident never happened again. My niece went back to calling him Baba the next day as if nothing had happened. When we asked her about it, she just gave us a confused look. She didn't remember saying it, let alone in that voice. To this day, I don't know how to explain it. Was it a coincidence? A fragment of my dad's longing for his mother that somehow manifested through my niece? Or something else? I'll never know. But sometimes, when I see my niece sitting on the floor in that same familiar pose, I can't help but wonder, was it really my grandma's soul, even if just for a moment? Outro. And that's the story of the day my niece spoke like my grandma. What do you think? Was it just a coincidence, or could it have been something more? A sign, maybe, or a glimpse of the unexplainable? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more chilling, thought-provoking tales, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button.